Hey guys, it's Mrs. Rewa. It's our second week of music online learning, having our music class from my living room. It's a little strange, but it's kind of fun at the same time. I wanted to share with you a little more information about Chopin this week, but I am going to be using the music book that we usually have in class. I'm sorry you guys all don't have one in front of you, but I'm going to read from it for you. I'm going to take some notes for you that I would like for you to also take down. If you don't have your music notebooks, do not worry about it. Just make sure that the notes are on a piece of paper that we can get into that notebook once we have access to it. And we're going to go ahead and begin. So let's review a little bit about what we learned about Chopin last week. We know that Chopin is a Polish Romantic composer. We know that he lived from 1810 to 1849. We know that Chopin is a pianist. He was a fabulous pianist. That's what he's known for, his amazing piano compositions and also his amazing piano playing. He studied at Warsaw Conservatory. His parents were highly educated, and we know that he is from the Romantic era. He is not from the Classical or Baroque era. He's from the Romantic era. And the piece that you heard last week that I had playing for you was Polonaise in G minor, written and published when he was only 8 years old. We're going to learn about a different piece today, but first I want to give you some information that your book gives us about Chopin, and then I'm going to talk about the piece of music I want you to know. So I'm going to sit down if that's okay. And I'm going to read out of our music book, so please listen. And I'm also going to bring the music book closer to you so that you can take a screenshot if you want. I'm actually going to start by doing that. So here is what our book has to say about Chopin. Take a screenshot or a photo of it if you need to. And there's one more I want you to see, and that's this top photograph here in your book. If you want to screenshot it or take a picture with your phone. Okay, and we're going to get started. So in your music books from school, it tells us that Frédéric Chopin was born and raised in Poland, which we already know. He was the son of a French father and a Polish mother. He learned to play the piano at an early age and became a brilliant improviser. We know that an improviser is someone that can make up music on the spot. His love for the piano became the focus of his creative energies. Settling in Paris at the age of 21, Chopin established himself as a leading teacher of piano and one of the greatest pianists of his time. Yet, he seldom performed in public, savoring his privacy and preferring to devote his time to piano composition, which is the writing of music. In 1837, during a period of depression, he composed his well-known Funeral March. The next year, he fell in love with George Sand, this is a woman, a novelist known for her unconventional ideas and well-publicized love affairs. Yes, her name was George Sand, and she was a woman, but she was a little risky for her time, you guys. Sometimes she would dress very differently than most women, and Chopin had a lot of respect for her. She wasn't afraid to say how she felt or to dress how she wanted or just to be brave about any of her opinions. And that was very extraordinary for women of the 1830s. She was a very unique individual, a very brave woman. Chopin wrote some of his most impressive works during his 10-year relationship with George Sand. Many of these pieces have a Polish flair, you know he's from Poland, particularly his dances, mazurkas, polonaises, and waltzes. These were all different kinds of pieces written during the Romantic era. So let's go over those again. There's dances, there's mazurkas, polonaises, and waltzes. His melodies draw their expressiveness from his harmonically inventive, technically brilliant accompaniments. Chopin sadly died of tuberculosis at the age of 39, which affected his lungs. Very sad that he was very young when he passed away. So we were talking about those different kinds of pieces that he enjoyed writing. One that I really loved playing in college, I know I played a nocturne, which means night music for you, last week, but I also learned a waltz, several waltzes of his in college, but this one is really beautiful. I'm just going to play the beginning of it. simple 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We know that a waltz is always in 3/4 time as opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4/4 time. So a waltz is always in 3/4 time, and Chopin wrote many, many waltzes. Now, I want to say one other thing about Chopin that your book talks about a little bit, and that is that Chopin wrote one of the most popular funeral marches, a piece used for a funeral out of any composer who has ever lived. Now, Beethoven also wrote a funeral march. I want you to listen to what your book says about this. The funeral march in classical music. Although Ludwig van Beethoven wrote a funeral march as the third movement of his piano sonata in A-flat major, the most famous funeral march is probably Frédéric Chopin's March Funeral from his piano sonata in B-flat minor. It talks about how his music is cataloged. In classical music, for Chopin, we say opus. Opus refers to a musical work or a set of works. So Opus 35 is Chopin's funeral march. It was the music that used to accompany the horse-drawn carriage holding the coffin of President John F. Kennedy as the funeral procession moved from the United States Capitol down Pennsylvania Avenue on its way to Arlington Cemetery. The president was assassinated on November 22nd in 1963 in Dallas, and the entire world mourned his death. You may have heard your parents talk about the death of JFK. You may have studied it already in history, social studies perhaps, but it was a very sad time for our country. He was a very well-loved president. And what you need to know is that Chopin's funeral march was played during Kennedy's funeral. And that march took place in DC. And I'm gonna attach a link to a video that you can see. It's a very old video, it's black and white, but you can hear Chopin's funeral march being played as the military is marching with JFK's casket in Washington, DC. It's really interesting to watch, so I'm gonna attach that as well. Chopin's march is in minor tonality. He uses a heavy plodding bass with a somber melody in dotted rhythm that invokes tragedy. So I wanna touch on two things. Number one, I want to talk about the difference between major and minor key. Major has kind of a happy sound, a light, joyous sound. But if I change one note in the major chord that I'm playing, it all of a sudden sounds more serious. The mood changes. And of course, Chopin's funeral march is not going to be in major key. It's in minor key because it's written for a serious and more somber occasion. I want you to listen to just the beginning of it. The notation of it is in the book right here. But I'm going to play just that very beginning that your book gives you so that you can hear. And I bet you guys will recognize it because a lot of times, I know it sounds silly, but like in cartoons, when like Roadrunner surrenders, and I know that this music is used several times in different things on TV and cartoons, especially when people are surrendering. You hear this music in the background, but you might not have known until now that it was Chopin who wrote it. It sounds like this. I'm going to attach that link, as I said, so that you can listen to that music being played with the actual footage from JFK's funeral. And I am also going to be attaching an assignment that has some questions pertaining to what I just went over. The notes that I want you to know, I'm going to put on the board right now. Ready? Here we go. The second piece I want you to know is Chopin's funeral march. And you do need to know this was played JFK's